On Christmas morning, my mother looked straight at my two children and said loudly, "Nolan, Ivy, you two don't get any gifts. You're not real family anyway. You're just adopted." Nolan, 7 years old, froze. Ivy, only 5, whispered, "But Grandma, we made you a card." My mother didn't even glance at them. She smiled at the other grandchildren and added coldly, "Blood is blood, Lily. I can't pretend anymore. They don't belong here." The room went silent. My children sat on the floor in their Christmas sweaters, staring at gifts that weren't theirs. I felt my heart break, but I said nothing. I just kept pouring the coffee with steady hands. That's when my brother Chris stood up, pulled a thick envelope from his coat pocket, and said in a low, sharp voice, "Since we're talking about real family and real blood, Mom, you're going to want to see this first. My name is Lily Hardy. I'm 35 years old. Welcome back to Revenger Episodes. Drop a comment if you've ever been told your children don't count, and subscribe for more quiet revenge stories." Let me back up. Because what happened that Christmas morning didn't start that day. It had been building for 7 years. 7 years of small cuts. 7 years of watching my mother decide, over and over, that some children counted as family and others didn't. I'm a pediatric nurse at C.S. Mott Children's Hospital in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I've worked there for 9 years. I know what it looks like when a child realizes they don't matter to someone who should love them. I see it in hospital rooms when a parent doesn't show up, when a grandparent refuses to visit, when someone looks at a child and decides they're not worth the effort. I never thought I'd see that look on my own children's faces. My husband Dan and I got married in 2015. He teaches high school biology. We're both professionals in our mid-30s living what should be an ordinary life. We have a small house with a fenced yard in Ann Arbor. We have a golden retriever. On paper, we look like the kind of stable family you'd see in a home magazine. Except we couldn't have biological children. We tried for 2 years. Fertility treatments, specialists, the whole expensive, heartbreaking cycle. And when it became clear that path wasn't going to work for us, we made a choice. We chose adoption. In March 2018, we brought home Nolan. He was 3 months old. I remember holding him in the hospital nursery and looking at his face and feeling something I'd never felt before. Not relief that the waiting was over, not gratitude that we'd finally become parents, just love, pure, uncomplicated, overwhelming love. 2 years later, in June 2020, we adopted Ivy. She was 2 months old. Nolan was barely 2.5. I remember him standing next to her car seat, staring at her with this look of complete wonder. He touched her tiny hand and whispered, "Baby sister. That's my family. Dan, Nolan, Ivy, and me." And for a long time, I thought that was enough. I thought if we just loved them hard enough, if we showed them every single day that they were wanted and chosen and valued, nothing else would matter. I was wrong, because my mother had very specific ideas about what family meant. And those ideas didn't include children who didn't share her blood. My mother is Diane Hardy. She's 65 years old. She spent 30 years as a real estate agent in Canton, Michigan, building a reputation as someone who understood family values. She's on the church committee. She volunteers at food drives. She knows everyone's name at the grocery store. To the outside world, she's exactly what a grandmother should be. But to my children, she was something else entirely. The first time I noticed it was Easter 2019. Nolan was barely 1 year old. My sisters Becca and Jen had brought their kids to my parents' house for the traditional egg hunt. My mother had prepared Easter baskets for all the grandchildren, 5 baskets, 6 children. When I asked about it, she'd said, "Oh, Lily, he's too young to know the difference." And honestly, I'm still adjusting to the idea. The idea of what? I'd asked. She'd looked at me like I was being deliberately dense. of him being part of things. I'd let it go that day. I told myself she needed time, that next year would be different. It wasn't. The pattern continued. Birthday parties where my kids got generic $20 gift cards while the other grandchildren got personalized, wrapped presents. Family beach trip in 2022 where mom bought matching swimwear for all the cousins except Nolan and Ivy. Christmas photos where she'd order prints for everyone's family except ours. And always, always, the comments. "These are my grandchildren," she'd say to church friends, gesturing to my sister's kids. Then she'd glance at Nolan and Ivy. "And Lily's, too. Not 7 grandchildren, 6 and Lily's, too." Like they were a separate category, a different species. Dan started asking me in 2023 why we kept going to family events. I didn't have a good answer. I told him it would get better. That mom just needed more time. That family was complicated and we had to try. But I was lying to both of us. Last November, I'd finally confronted her. I'd gone to my parents' house with a list. I'd written down every single time she'd excluded my children over the past 5 years. I'd told myself I was being reasonable, rational. That if I just showed her the pattern, she'd understand. My mother had listened for maybe 30 seconds before cutting me off. "They're not really our blood, Lily," she'd said. Her voice had been calm, clinical, like she was explaining a return policy. "You chose them. We didn't. There's a difference." "They're your grandchildren," I'd said. "Legally, yes," she'd agreed. "But not the same way. You have to understand that." My father had been in the room. He'd looked at his hands. He hadn't said a word. I'd left that day knowing something fundamental had broken. I just didn't know my brother Chris had been standing in the hallway the entire time, listening to every word. At Thanksgiving 2025, things got worse. A friend from my mother's church had asked about the grandchildren. Mom had gestured to all 7 cousins standing in the living room. Then she'd looked at Nolan and Ivy. "These 2 aren't really ours, you know," she'd said. Loud enough for Nolan to hear. Loud enough for everyone to hear. "Lily chose adoption. It's different." On the drive home, Nolan had asked from the back seat, "Mom, what did Grandma mean by not really ours?" I hadn't had an answer. 2 weeks later, my mother called me. "I've made a decision," she'd said. No greeting, no small talk. "I'm not pretending anymore. Nolan and Ivy need to understand where they stand in this family. It's not fair to the real grandchildren to keep acting like everyone's equal when they're not." "Mom, they're 5 and 7 years old. Old enough to learn the truth," she'd cut me off. "Blood is blood, Lily. You can't change that. I won't pretend anymore." I'd hung up on her, and I'd known, with absolute certainty, that Christmas was going to be bad. But I'd gone anyway, because that's what people like me do. We keep trying. We keep hoping. We keep believing that family will eventually choose love over cruelty. On Christmas Eve, my brother Chris sent me a text. "If Mom does anything to the kids tomorrow, I'm done staying quiet. I mean it, Lily." I didn't understand what he meant. Then he'd sent another message. "Can you screenshot your 23andMe DNA relatives page and send it to me? I need to show something tomorrow." I'd been confused. I'd done a 23andMe test back in 2024 for breast cancer genetic screening. It runs in my father's family. I'd pulled up the app, taken a screenshot of my DNA relatives page, and sent it to Chris without really understanding why. The screenshot showed that Chris and I matched as half-siblings. I'd thought it was a glitch. We were full siblings. Same mom, same dad. Or so I'd believed. I'd texted back, "What's going on?" 3 dots had appeared on my screen, then disappeared. Then finally, "You'll see." On Christmas morning, we drove from Ann Arbor to Canton. 30 minutes with Dan, Nolan, and Ivy in the car. The kids were excited at first. They always were at the start of these visits. Hope is stubborn in children. They'd made a Christmas card for their grandmother. 3 days of work. Drawings of Christmas trees and snowmen. Glitter glued around the edges in careful patterns. "We love you, Grandma," written in Ivy's uneven, careful letters. "Do you think Grandma will like our card?" Ivy had asked. Dan had glanced at me. His hand had found mine on the center console. "We'll see, honey," I'd said, which was the best I could do without lying. Nolan hadn't said anything, but I'd seen his expression in the rearview mirror. 7 years old and already learning not to expect much. My parents' house looked like something from a Christmas catalog. White lights wrapped around every surface, a wreath the size of a small car on the front door. Snow dusted perfectly across the front lawn. Becca's SUV was already there. So was Jen's minivan. Everyone had arrived before us. Chris's car wasn't there yet. Dan had leaned close as we'd gotten out. "If it gets bad, we leave. You don't owe them a performance." I'd nodded. But we both knew I'd stay. I always did. Ivy had grabbed my hand as we'd walked to the door, already bracing herself. Inside, chaos. 7 children running around the living room, wrapping paper and ribbons everywhere from the stockings they'd already opened. My father opened the door and immediately pulled me into a hug. "There's my Lily," he'd said. Then he'd crouched down to Nolan and Ivy's level. His whole face had softened. "And there are my 2 favorite artists. Did you bring that card you've been working on?" Ivy had nodded, suddenly shy. She'd held out the envelope with both hands. Dad had taken it gently. He'd started to open it. "Vincent." My mother's voice had cut across the room like a blade. "Don't open that now. We're about to do presents." Dad had hesitated. Then he'd set the card on the side table near the entrance, unopened. My mother had come out of the kitchen wearing a red cardigan and her church smile. She'd looked at me, at Dan, and then her gaze had passed over Nolan and Ivy like they were furniture. "Oh, how sweet," she'd said about the card, not looking at it, not touching it. "I'll look at this later." Later meant never. Ivy's face had fallen. She'd worked so hard on that card. I'd looked at the Christmas tree, at the decorations covering every surface, at the 7 wrapped presents arranged under the tree in a careful semicircle. Each one had a name tag in my mother's handwriting: Addison, Caleb, Zoe, Nathan, Avery, Hudson, Lillianne. I'd counted them twice. 7, not 9. My stomach had tightened. Chris had arrived 20 minutes later. He'd walked in and nodded to everyone, hugged Dad, nodded at Mom. But he hadn't taken off his coat. I'd noticed that immediately. He'd sat down on the far end of the couch with his coat still on, one hand resting near his inside pocket. The pocket bulged slightly, like something thick was folded inside. Mom had looked at him. "Christopher, you're late, and take off that coat. You look like you're about to leave." Chris hadn't responded. He'd just caught my eye across the room and mouthed, "I'm here." It had felt like a warning. Mom had clapped her hands together. "All right, everyone, grandchildren around the tree, it's time for presents." 9 kids scrambled to sit in a semicircle around the Christmas tree. Nolan and Ivy sat a little to the left, slightly apart from the others. Not by choice, just by habit. They'd learned where they fit in this family. I stood near the kitchen doorway. Dan stood beside me, his hand on my back. My mother picked up the stack of 7 presents. "Addison," she called. "This one's for you, sweetheart." Addison, my oldest niece, 11 years old and full of confidence, came forward. Mom handed her the box with a hug and a kiss on the forehead. "I remembered you said you wanted that art set," Mom said. "The one with the watercolors." Addison beamed. I watched Nolan's face, neutral, carefully blank. Ivy's hand crept toward mine where I stood. Caleb, Zoe. Becca's other 2 kids received their presents. Hugs, kisses, smiles all around. Nathan, Avery, Hudson, Lillian. One by one, Jen's 4 children came forward. One by one, they got their presents. Mom laughed when Hudson tore into his box immediately, pulling out a remote control car. And then she was holding nothing. No more boxes in her arms. The room was loud with ripping paper and excited voices, 7 cousins absorbed in their gifts. And Nolan and Ivy sat on the floor with nothing. Ivy looked at me, confused, hurt starting to register on her face. My mother turned. She looked directly at Nolan and Ivy, and she said, loudly enough for everyone in the house to hear, "Nolan, Ivy, you two don't get any gifts. You're not real family anyway. You're just adopted." The room went completely silent. Every single person froze. Nolan's whole body went still. Not shocked, not crying, just frozen. Like he'd been expecting it but still didn't know how to process the reality of it happening. Ivy whispered, "But Grandma, we made you a card." My mother didn't even glance at the card still sitting on the side table. She didn't look at Ivy. She smiled at the other 7 grandchildren, at Addison and Caleb and Zoe and Nathan and Avery and Hudson and Lily Ann, and added coldly, "Blood is blood, Lily. I can't pretend anymore. They don't belong here." I felt something crack open inside my chest. Actually crack. Like a physical sensation of something breaking. But I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. My father said, "Diane, that's not—" "Vincent, don't." Mom cut him off. Sharp. Final. "This is my choice. They'll understand when they're older. It's about blood. It's about legacy. It's about what's real." Dad looked at me. His face was pained. But he didn't say anything else. He never did. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab my children and run. I wanted to tell my mother exactly what she was and what she'd just done. But I didn't. Because I'd learned something in that moment. Silence wasn't surrender. Sometimes silence was strategy. I walked to the kitchen, picked up the coffee pot with hands that didn't shake, and I started pouring. 1 cup, 2 cups, 3. Becca took hers without meeting my eyes. Her hand trembled slightly. Jen murmured thanks and looked away. Mom took hers like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just told 2 small children they weren't worthy of a Christmas present. Like she hadn't just announced to a room full of witnesses that blood mattered more than love. Dad shook his head when I offered him a cup. He was staring at the floor. I poured slowly, methodically, like I had all the time in the world. I could feel them watching me, waiting for the explosion, for the tears, for the confrontation they'd all been bracing for since November. Becca whispered to Jen, "Is she okay?" Mom looked almost satisfied, like she'd finally gotten through to me, like my silence meant agreement, like she'd won. She didn't understand that silence could be a weapon too. Chris stood up from the couch. He reached into his coat pocket, and he pulled out an envelope. Thick, white, official-looking. It bulged with multiple pages. I could see a logo in the corner from where I stood. Great Lakes Genetic Testing. "Christopher," Mom said. Irritated now. "If you're leaving, just go. We're in the middle of Christmas." "I'm not leaving," Chris said. His voice was low, sharp, controlled in a way I'd never heard from him before. "I'm staying for this." "For what?" Mom asked. Chris looked at me, just for a second. Then he looked at Mom. "Since we're talking about real family and real blood," he said in that same low, controlled voice, "Mom, you're going to want to see this first." Mom stared at the envelope. "What is that?" "DNA results," Chris said. "Mine and Dad's. Plus some other documents you're going to want to see." He paused. "Or maybe you won't." The room went absolutely still. Mom laughed. It sounded nervous, brittle. "DNA results for what?" Since we're discussing real family, Chris said, looking directly at her, I thought everyone should know who actually is family in this room. He paused again. Let the silence build. Starting with me. Becca's voice cracked. Chris, what are you talking about? My mother's face changed, just for a second. Something flickered behind her eyes. Fear. She stood up. Christopher, put that away. This is Christmas. We're not doing this now. When should we do it? Chris asked. Still calm. Still controlled. When you're done humiliating children? When you're done deciding who counts as family and who doesn't? Son, Dad said quietly. What's going on? Chris looked at Dad. His voice softened. Just slightly. Dad, I'm sorry you have to find out like this. You deserved better than this. Dad's face went pale. Find out what? Chris held up the thick envelope. That I'm not your son. Not biologically. The room exploded. What? Becca's voice was sharp. Shocked. Chris, what the hell? Jen started. Mom lunged forward, reached for the envelope. Christopher, stop this right now. You don't know what you're... Chris stepped back, held the envelope out of reach. Too late, Mom, he said. I know exactly what I'm doing. He tore open the envelope. Chris pulled the contents out slowly, deliberately. He spread them across the coffee table. Everyone crowded around except me. I stayed where I was, coffee pot still in my hand, watching. DNA test results. 3 pages. Official lab letterhead. I could see the keyline even from across the room. Probability of paternity. 0.00%. Vincent Hardy is excluded as the biological father of Christopher Hardy. Photocopies of letters. Old. Yellowed at the edges even in the copies. Dates visible. June 1983. July 1984. A photograph. A copy of an old Polaroid. A younger version of my mother standing very close to a dark-haired man who wasn't my father. On the back, visible through the photocopy, my mother's handwriting, Tom and me, summer '84, and a printed screenshot. I recognized it immediately. My 23andMe DNA relatives page, showing Christopher Hardy, 50% DNA match, half-sibling through one parent only. This is why it's thick, Chris said. His voice was steady, even. All the evidence. Everything you've been hiding for 41 years. He looked around the room, at Becca and Jen, staring at the documents with identical expressions of shock. At Dad, who looked like he might be physically sick. At Mom, whose face had gone white as paper. Chris started to talk. In November, Mom asked me to help clean out the attic. She wanted to donate old stuff before the holidays. I found a trunk. Locked. Old combination lock. He paused. She told me not to open it. Said it was just old paperwork. Nothing important. Another pause. That's when I knew it was important. Mom started to say something. Chris held up a hand. I came back the next day when she wasn't home. The lock wasn't hard to pick. Inside, I found letters. Dozens of them. All from 1983 to 1984. Signed TB. Addressed to My Diane. Love letters. He pulled out one of the photocopies. Read aloud. I can't wait to meet our son. I wish I could be there when he's born. But I know this is what's best for him. Vincent will be a good father. Better than I could be right now. Chris looked up. Met everyone's eyes. I was born in April 1985, 9 months after the last letter. The silence was absolute, complete. I found a photo, Chris continued. Company picnic. Mom with a man I didn't recognize. They looked close. Very close. On the back, in Mom's handwriting. Tom and me, summer '84. He held up the photocopy of the picture. Everyone could see it now. Mom, younger, laughing, standing so close to a man that their shoulders touched. A man who looked nothing like my father. I needed to be sure, Chris said. So on November 25th, I ordered a DNA test. For myself. 23andMe. Commercial kit. Completely legal. My own cheek swab. My own choice. He looked at Mom. I wasn't testing Dad without his permission. I was testing me. To see what the DNA would say about who I am. On December 15th, I got my results, Chris said. The ethnicity breakdown didn't match what I expected from a full Hardy bloodline, and then I saw the DNA relatives feature. He pointed to the screenshot on the table. There was Lily's name, Lily Hardy, 50% DNA match. The platform labeled us, half-siblings. We share DNA through one parent only. I felt every eye in the room turn to me. That's when I knew for certain, Chris said. We have the same mother, but different fathers. Mom made a sound. Small. Broken. The 23andMe results told me the truth, Chris continued. But I needed medical-grade confirmation, for legal purposes, for absolute certainty. He looked at Dad. So I called you, Dad. Told you I was doing genetic health screening for heart disease risk. Asked if you'd do a sample kit too so we could compare family patterns. Dad's face was gray. You said yes. You didn't suspect anything. Why would you? You trusted me. I sent you the kit. You did the cheek swab voluntarily and mailed it in. Chris picked up the lab results, held them so everyone could see the official letterhead, the certification, the conclusion. December 20th. The certified lab results came back. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. Vincent Hardy is excluded as the biological father of Christopher Hardy. He set the papers back down. It was right there. Official. Medical grade. Certified. Undeniable. He looked at Mom. I printed everything. I put it in this envelope, and I decided to wait. To see if you'd do it again. If you'd use real family as a weapon one more time. If you'd hurt innocent children using blood as an excuse. His voice hardened. So when you stood there this morning and told 2 7-year-old and 5-year-old children they weren't real family because they don't share your blood, I decided it was time. He paused. Let it sink in. Time for everyone to know that the person obsessed with bloodlines and legacy and whose real family has been lying about blood for 41 years. Dad said, barely a whisper. Diane, is this true? Mom didn't answer. And in that silence, everyone knew. Becca picked up one of the letter copies. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. Mom, she said, is Chris telling the truth? Is he Dad's son or not? Mom's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. No sound came out. She looked at Dad. And that look told him everything he needed to know. Dad didn't yell. He didn't stand up. He just sat there in his chair by the fireplace, staring at the woman he'd been married to for 43 years. Diane, he said. His voice was barely audible. 41 years. I raised him. I loved him as my son. I never questioned it. Not once. And you never told me? Vincent, 41 years, he repeated. That's when I set the coffee pot down. I pulled out my phone, opened the 23andMe app, and I held it up for everyone to see. I did a 23andMe test too, I said. My voice cut through the chaos. Everyone turned to me. Last year, 2024, for breast cancer genetic screening. It runs in Dad's family. I wanted to know my risk factors. I showed them my phone screen, the DNA relatives page. Chris and I matched as half-siblings. Same mother, different fathers. I looked directly at my mother, which means I'm Dad's biological daughter. 100%. Mom's face went white. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. I looked around the room, at Becca and Jen staring at the documents, At Dad, whose entire world had just collapsed. At Mom, who'd built her identity on blood and legacy and who was real family. And I said, my voice calm and clear and controlled, "So let me get this straight, Mom." I paused. Let the room fall silent. You rejected my children because they're not real blood. You said they don't belong here. You excluded them from Christmas, humiliated them in front of their cousins, told them to their faces that they're not real family because they're adopted. Another pause. But your favorite son, the one you've always defended, always protected, always put first, he's not Dad's blood. I let that sit for a moment. And me? The daughter you've always treated like an afterthought? The one whose children you just destroyed on Christmas morning? I looked at her. I'm the only one who's actually his biological child. Jen whispered, "Oh my God." Mom tried to speak. It's not the same. It's different. I was protecting... Protecting what? Chris's voice was ice. The family? You were protecting yourself. You were protecting your lie. Dad stood up. Without a word, he walked toward the door. "Vincent!" Mom called after him. Her voice was desperate now, panicked. "Vincent, wait! Let me explain. Please." He didn't turn around, didn't stop. Just walked out the door and closed it behind him. Mom turned back to us. For the first time in my life, I saw my mother powerless. Chris pulled another set of papers from the envelope. "There's more," he said. "I found him. Thomas Brennan. He worked with you at Coldwell Banker in 1984, Mom." He looked at the papers. I looked him up. He's still alive. Lives in Lansing now. I haven't called him yet, but I will. Mom looked like she might collapse. "You can't." "I can," Chris said. "And I will. Because I have a right to know where I came from. I have a right to my full medical history. I have a right to the truth you've been hiding my entire life." Becca was still holding the letter copy. She looked at Mom with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. "Mom," she said, "how could you do this to Dad? For 40 years? How could you let him raise a child thinking it was his when you knew it wasn't?" Jen turned on her. "That's what you're focused on? Not the fact that she just told two innocent kids they're not family using a standard she herself violated?" Becca flinched. "I'm focused on both. She looked at Mom. "God, Mom. All those years you talked about legacy, about bloodline, about keeping the family together, about who's real and who's not. And you were lying the whole time," Jen finished. I looked at my sisters. "Did either of you know?" "No," Becca said immediately, firmly. "We didn't know." "I didn't," Jen agreed. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were wet. "But I knew Mom was hard on Nolan and Ivy. I saw it happening. I saw the way she treated them differently. And I didn't say anything." She paused. "I told myself it wasn't my business. That it was between you and Mom. That maybe she'd come around." She looked at the floor. "I'm sorry, Lily. I should have stood up for them. I should have said something years ago." Becca nodded slowly. "Me too. I'm sorry. I saw it and I didn't stop it. It wasn't enough. But it was something." The door opened. Dad walked back in. He was holding his coat and car keys. He looked at Mom. "I'm staying at Chris's place," he said. His voice was flat, empty. All emotion drained out. "Don't call me. Don't text me. I need time to think about what this means, about what you did, about who you are. Vincent, please." 41 years, Diane," he said, and his voice cracked on her name. "You had 41 years to tell me the truth. Every single day for 41 years, you chose to lie. You chose to let me raise another man's child without knowing. You chose to build our entire marriage on a foundation of deception." He paused. So now I'm choosing to leave. He crossed the room, pulled Chris into a tight hug. You're my son, Dad said. His voice broke. I raised you. I love you. Biology doesn't change that. A piece of paper doesn't change what we are to each other. Do you understand me? Chris's shoulders shook. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry you had to find out like this. You have nothing to be sorry for, Dad said firmly. Nothing. You didn't create this lie. You just exposed it. And you had every right to know the truth. Then Dad came to me. He took my hands in his. Lily? He said. His eyes were wet. I should have stood up for you, for Nolan and Ivy. I knew what your mother was doing. I saw it. Year after year, I saw it. And I didn't stop it. He paused, swallowed hard. I told myself it wasn't my place, that she was their grandmother and had a right to her feelings, that maybe she'd change. But I was wrong. I was a coward. And I'm sorry. I felt tears come. Finally. You can start now, Dad. You can make it right now. He nodded. I will. I promise you. I will. Mom stood alone in the corner of the living room. No one was looking at her. No one was listening to her. The woman who'd controlled the definition of family for decades was suddenly invisible. I turned to face her directly. You will not see Nolan and Ivy again, I said. My voice was steady, clear, final. Not until you can look at them and see them as your grandchildren, real grandchildren, no conditions, no asterisks. No, but they're adopted. No, not the same way. Just your grandchildren. I paused. Until you can do that, until you can treat them with the same love and respect you give every other child in this family, you don't get access to them. Or to me. Mom's face crumpled. Lily, you can't. I can, I said. And I am. This ends today. Dan appeared at my side. He'd been standing in the doorway with Nolan and Ivy, keeping them in the next room, away from the worst of it. He put his arm around me. We're leaving, Dan said quietly. I nodded, looked at my children. Let's go home. Nolan took my hand. Ivy took Dan's. They didn't look back at their grandmother. They didn't ask for the card they'd made. They just walked out with us. Chris walked us to the door. I'll bring Dad to my place, he said quietly. We'll talk. Figure things out. I'll text you later. Thank you, I whispered. For everything. For standing up. For telling the truth. You're my sister, he said. The real one. As we walked to the car, I heard my mother start to cry. Loud, gasping sobs. I didn't stop walking. It was Christmas morning, and for the first time in 7 years, I'd chosen my children over keeping the peace. It felt like the best gift I'd ever given them. That afternoon, Dan and I sat down with Nolan and Ivy in our living room. We'd turned on our own small Christmas tree, made hot chocolate. The kids sat between us on the couch, and I tried to find the right words. Grandma Diane said some very hurtful things today, I told them. About you not being part of the family. That's not true. It will never be true. But because she said it, we're going to take a break from seeing her. Nolan nodded. He actually looked relieved. Ivy asked in a small voice, Are we in trouble? My heart shattered. No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. Nothing at all. Grandma did something wrong. Adults can make mistakes too. Big ones. When can we see Grandpa? Nolan asked. Soon, I said. Grandpa loves you very much. He's going to visit us very soon. I promise. That night, Chris texted, Dad's staying with me. He's not going back. He meant what he said. 3 days later, Dad texted me, Can I come see Nolan and Ivy? I want to make things right. I should have done it years ago. I called him immediately. Dad, are you sure you're ready? I'm seeing a therapist, he said. started yesterday. I need help processing what Diane did, what I let happen. But I also need to make amends to you and your kids. Will you let me try? Yes, I said. Of course you can. Dad came over the next day. He was carrying something wrapped in tissue paper. He knelt down to Nolan and Ivy's level. I need to show you something, he said quietly. When I went back to get my things from the house, I found this on the side table. He unwrapped it carefully. Their Christmas card. The one they'd made. The one Grandma had never opened. Ivy's eyes went wide. Dad opened it slowly. Looked at every drawing, at every bit of glitter. At Ivy's careful letters spelling out, "We love you, Grandma." His eyes filled with tears. "This is the most beautiful card I've ever seen," he said. His voice shook. "I'm so sorry Grandma didn't open it. I'm so sorry she didn't see how special it is. I'm so sorry I didn't make sure you always felt loved and wanted at our house." He paused. "Can I ask you something? Can I be a better grandpa now? Will you give me a chance to do better?" Nolan looked at me. I nodded. He looked back at Grandpa. "Okay," he said quietly. Ivy asked, "Can we make you a new card, Grandpa?" Dad smiled through his tears. "I would love that. But actually, I was hoping I could keep this one. I want to frame it. Put it in my new apartment so I can see it every single day. Would that be okay?" Both kids nodded. My mother called 17 times in the first week after Christmas. I didn't answer. She texted. I blocked her number. She sent letters to our house. I read one. Just one. It said, "I never meant to hurt them. I was raised to believe blood mattered above everything. I don't know how to see them the way you do. I'm trying to understand, but I can't. Please don't take my family away from me." I put the letter in a drawer. Didn't respond. Maybe someday I would. But not now. Not yet. Chris told me in early January that Mom had asked him if he'd forgive her. "What did you say?" I asked. We were having coffee at a shop in Ann Arbor. "I told her I need time," Chris said. "A lot of time. Maybe years. She didn't just lie to Dad. She lied to me. About who I am. About my identity. My medical history. My entire origin story." He took a sip of coffee. "And then she used the very thing she violated. Bloodline, biology, family. To hurt your kids. To hurt innocent children who never did anything to her." "Did you call Thomas?" I asked. "I did," Chris said. "Called him the day after Christmas. We talked for over an hour. He cried. Said he'd always wondered about me but had respected Mom's wishes to stay away. Said he thought Dad knew. Thought everyone knew." Chris looked out the window. "We met for coffee last week. He's a good man. He's not trying to replace Dad. He knows Vincent is my father in every way that matters. But it was good to meet him. To see where I came from. To get my full medical history. To have answers." "How does it feel?" I asked. "Weird," Chris admitted. "But also okay. I know who I am. I'm Vincent Hardy's son. I'm your brother. That didn't change. Biology is just biology. Family is what you build." He looked at me. "I think Dad's going to leave her. For good." By late January, Dad still hadn't gone back. He was living with Chris in his 2-bedroom apartment in Dearborn. "I don't know if I can trust her again," Dad told me over the phone in early February. "It's not just the affair. Affairs happen. People make mistakes. But 41 years of lying every single day, 41 years of watching me love a child I thought was mine without ever telling me the truth?" He paused. "And what she did to your children. That showed me who she really is, what she's capable of. I can't forgive that. I don't think I can." "You don't have to decide everything right now," I said. "I know," he said. "But I'm leaning toward legal separation. Maybe divorce eventually? I don't know yet. In early March, Dad filed for legal separation. Not divorce. Not yet. But living apart. Finances separate. A clear legal boundary. I can't be with someone I don't trust, he told me. And I can't forgive what she did to you and your kids. Maybe someday. But I don't think so. Becca called me in February. I don't know how to do this, she said. Her voice was strained. I'm not defending what Mom did. It was horrible. Unforgivable. But she's still our mother. I understand, I said. You have to make your own choices about your relationship with her. I'm not telling you what to do. But I also want a relationship with you, Becca said. And with Nolan and Ivy. I want my kids to know their cousins. Then you're welcome here anytime, I said. But if you bring Mom around them without asking me first, if you try to force a reconciliation or ambush us, we're done. Completely done. Do you understand? She agreed immediately. Jen sent me a text the same week. I'm with you. Mom needs to earn her way back. If she ever can. I don't know if she can. But she needs to try. The cousin surprised me most of all. Addison called in mid-February, my 11-year-old niece. Aunt Lily, she said. Why aren't we doing family dinners anymore at Grandma's house? I explained simply. Honestly. Grandma said some very unkind things to Nolan and Ivy, about them being adopted, about them not being real family, so we're taking a break until she can treat them with respect. That's really mean, Addison said. Her voice was angry. That's like saying they're not my cousins, but they are my cousins. Yes, I said. They are. Can I still hang out with them? She asked. Can they come over to our house? Can we do things without Grandma there? Of course, I said. Anytime. Within a week, Nolan and Ivy were getting play date invitations from their cousins, at parks, at Becca's house, at our house, away from Diane's house. Away from the woman who decided they didn't count. Family didn't fracture cleanly. It bent. Some parts broke completely. Some parts stayed connected but changed shape. But the parts that mattered, the parts built on actual love instead of obligation or image, those got stronger. By February, we'd started new traditions. Sunday dinners at our house. Just us, Dan's parents, Chris and Dad. No drama, no cruel comments, no one deciding who was real family and who wasn't. Nolan and Ivy loved it. They had Grandpa Vincent's full attention now. He played board games with them, asked about their drawings, listened to their stories about school, hung every single piece of artwork they made on his apartment refrigerator. Is this better than before? Ivy asked me one Sunday in March. We were cleaning up after dinner. Yes, sweetheart, I said. This is much better. Chris told me in March that his relationship with Thomas was growing. We're meeting once a month, he said. Just coffee and conversation. He's not trying to be my dad. He knows Vincent is my dad in every way that matters. But it's good to have answers. To know my full medical history. To understand where I came from genetically. I'm glad, I said. And I meant it. The kids were doing better by April. Nolan's teacher called to say he seemed more confident at school, more willing to raise his hand, more willing to take up space in the classroom. Ivy laughed more, sang more, danced around the kitchen while we made dinner. One day in mid-April, Nolan said to me, Mom, I'm glad we don't have to go to Grandma Diane's house anymore. Why is that, honey? I asked. Because I always felt like I had to be really quiet and really small there, he said. Matter of fact, like he was explaining something obvious. Like, if I was too loud or took up too much space, she'd remember I wasn't supposed to be there, that I didn't really belong. He was 7 years old. 7 years old, and he'd been carrying that weight. You never have to feel that way again, I told him. Not anywhere we go. Not ever. You belong everywhere you are. Do you understand? He nodded. And for the first time, I thought he might actually start to believe it. In mid-April, Dad came over with something wrapped in tissue paper. "I've been thinking about this for weeks," he said, trying to figure out the right thing to do. He sat down with Nolan and Ivy, unwrapped the tissue paper carefully. Their Christmas card. The one they'd made. The one Grandma had never opened. The one Dad had taken with him when he'd left. "I had this framed," he said quietly. Turned it around to show them. The card was mounted in a simple wooden frame behind glass. The drawings, the glitter, Ivy's careful letters, all preserved. "I put it on the wall in my living room," Dad said. "Right in the center where everyone who visits can see it. Because I want to remember something important." He looked at both kids. "I want to remember that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who loves you, who makes space for you to exist exactly as you are." He paused. "And I want to ask you both something. Can I be part of your Christmas this year? Your real Christmas? The one you have with people who love you without conditions?" Nolan and Ivy both nodded. Ivy asked, "Will we make a new card for you, Grandpa?" "I would love that more than anything," Dad said. "Here's what I learned. Family isn't about who you share DNA with. It's about who shows up, who protects you when you're vulnerable, who chooses love when it would be easier to choose image or comfort or tradition." My mother chose pride. She chose a definition of family that required bloodlines and biology and perfect genetic connections. She chose a 41-year-old lie over the truth that could have freed everyone, and she lost everything because of it. Welcome back to Resemblance episodes. If you've ever been told your children don't count, if someone's ever used blood or real family or not the same to hurt people you love, I'm telling you something important. Speak up, set boundaries, choose the child, because one day that child will be grown, and they will remember exactly who stood up for them when it mattered, and who didn't. Drop a comment below if you've ever dealt with family who rejected your kids because of adoption, step-family dynamics, or any other reason that made them not real family in someone's eyes. Tell me where you're listening from, and subscribe for more stories where the truth always comes out and quiet revenge wins. We're building something new now. Something better. Last weekend, we went to Dad's apartment. He gave us a tour, showed us how he'd set everything up. And there, on his living room wall, right in the center where everyone could see it, was the framed Christmas card. Nolan and Ivy stood in front of it. They were smiling. Actually smiling. They were surrounded by people who chose them, who love them without asterisks, who don't need biology to see them as real. And that's what family really means. Not blood. Choice. That Christmas morning when my mother excluded my children, I stayed silent. But my brother didn't. And that silence, that choice to wait, to let the truth emerge in its own time, to trust that justice would come, changed everything. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let someone expose themselves completely. And then walk away with the people who actually matter. My children know now, in a way they never knew before, that they are wanted, that they are chosen, that they are loved. Not in spite of being adopted. Just loved. Completely. Unconditionally. Without conditions or asterisks or quiet reservations. That's the family we're building. The real one.